Let's do a campaign diary for the Dark Sun stream that's just ended its, I guess, arc or whatever. We'll be back in the summer probably to Dark Sun, but we played, I guess, four adventures in it and got through 25 sessions and kind of normal play sessions, which you can go and watch if you like. I kind of started the streams as a way of, amongst other things, archiving classic adventure game play, just having some examples of my own that I can be like, oh, this is how I do it. Showing some, it can be done, and I think also as an excuse to get some of these, particularly these second edition settings, which really you think of as heavily linear story kind of game settings, like Dark Sun and Spelljammer and Council of Worms, and just opening them up a bit to more traditional play, more classic play. So yeah, I've done some campaign diaries for Daggerford, my Open Table Realms game, after 20 and 40 sessions respectively. This is after 25 sessions because that's how long it took. It was a funny thing, or it's a funny thing to think about organising length of stream when you're like, oh, well, we'll need this many episodes, you'd think. But actually, it's a game, so if it takes longer, or technically if it takes shorter, you just need to take that time. And there's no pressure on me, so it was fine. But I'd expected possibly to finish slightly quicker, but then just the players found stuff they wanted to do and wanted to take risks on, and you want to lean into that rather than saying no, we're going to stop it artificially here. 25. Each episode is or each session is just over 2 hours long on average. So you're talking about a bit over 50 hours, 52, 53 hours, whatever it might be, 55 hours. And so 25 sessions roughly become, in terms of 4 hour sessions, it's something like 14 4 hour sessions or something. I guess 12 to 14, depending on exactly how it averages out. And the 4 hour session seems to be what is roughly in mind when you read about, say, Gary saying PCs should level every 3 to 6 sessions, or every 3 to 6 adventures, he says. And you see similar advice elsewhere. So roughly, 12 to 14 sessions. Each player equivalent leveled up, I guess, 2 characters, which roughly makes, means that our progress was good for that, which is a good measure that the design at the highest level of just getting progression works. So questions about how I built the campaign was I did it with the players. There is a session zero, which is in a sense a lot like the kind of session zeros that often deride Hypocrite Eye. But partly it's about teaching players character creation and dealing with the Dark Sun special stuff, but also about saying what kind of campaign. They'd said they wanted to do a trading campaign and a kind of exploration archaeology campaign on the chat, and then I was like, okay, well, let's just develop some of this stuff and we'll work out some of the details on the stream. So that I gave a few possibilities for Dark Sun, and the one we went for was what has become Mysteries of Athas. This idea of basically there is a failing trading house that sees its niche. It's stuck out in the desert and it sees its niches. Maybe let's go and search ruins and get archaeological material. Let's make ourselves rich with that kind of scrap, like with high risk, high reward stuff. So we need adventurers. We're not going to be trading spices. We're not doing big caravans. It's kind of specialism stuff. And I gave them some hooks, and it was all stuff near House Sisera, which is down in the southeast of Athas. And I found a map. It's a kind of post Cerulean Storm map, I think, technically, and it's of the whole of Athas. But as the version is unmarked, you can find it on the Dark Sun Reddit. As it's unmarked, it suited me really well. And I was like, hey, this is just this map that Master Sisera has of the whole world, basically, including places most people don't know about, gives scope for expansion, and I can see the players, pushing out in the future. Right now, though, they are, firmly in the tier region. It's interesting, Dark Sun starts typically at 3rd level. There's the thing where you have 4 characters, a character tree, or up to 4 characters, but that's the kind of principle. And it's an interesting attempt to, what you can see, there are a few things going on. One, it skips what you could call the tutorial levels, the very low levels, 1st and 2nd, which Gary also kind of saw as they're training levels there, and they're fun, but they are levels for players to kind of learn how to play in. And Dark Sun skips that and goes to 3rd level and says, straight away, you have 2nd level spells, particularly that's one of the boundaries. You've got an average, if you're a fighter, of 3d10. You've had 3d10, say, plus an average of +1 con. So you should have something like 17 hit points at least. And in fact, because Dark Sun, you have better abilities basically to start with. Like the character generation gives you better abilities. You should have more than that as a third level fighter or gladiator. Um, there's a few different kind of twists there with the way that characters work. That's trying to get you into that not quite mid game, though. I think we ended up just pushing into the start of the mid game, but at the end of the early game, you skip straight to that. You have the stable play element where you start with multiple characters, and where particularly you're told, oh, you can pick the right character for the right thing. There's some interesting stuff, and I commented on it up front actually, just to say that this is one of those areas that you realise just rules changing play. I actually didn't mind I liked the character tree thing in general. I liked the shared alignment across characters. I liked the principle about not having kind of quantum inventories between them. They had to have distinct inventories. I especially liked the level 2 characters up at once principle, as long as the second was lower level, then the level being level 2, because and what I thought was very effective about that was that it mitigated, in terms of success and advancing characters, it mitigated the high risk of the setting. And we'll talk about that as I kind of do more of a chronological thing. I think something that didn't work so well, and you can see, by the way, there's a thing, and this is something that didn't work so well, but you can see there's an attempt to deal with time pressure in a stable situation where characters are from different places by saying you need to take a full day, or what I think is a full day or something, to get a new character in, as opposed to you find a character in the dungeon and they join you, kind of thing, the classic thing, classic way to replace a dead character or a badly injured character. And that's an attempt to put in the same time pressure that is there. You read the 1EDMG, you read Gary's comments on timekeeping, and time jail, as some people call it, and you can see it's an attempt to do a tiny bit of that. The problem is that it's essentially just becomes frustrating if you are actually in a situation where someone's got a character down, and you'd normally say, yeah, just bring in a character, create a new character and jump in, or control a senior henchman, I guess. It's an odd kind of mix between classic and trad modes. And you see this actually, there's a few attempts to reclaim earlier styles of gaming. So here you have the stable play with Night Below, which is a very good module. I've reviewed it here. You have part of Carl Sargent. So this is unofficially Greyhawk. It was initially going to be officially Greyhawk, part of his great, really interesting 90s running Greyhawk. But there you have gold for XP. He's like, you should use gold for XP here. And it creates a very different kind of dynamic towards how you approach the different threads and rumours you hear. Bruce Cordell as well does certainly reclaim some of that old DNA. You see a few attempts to reclaim earlier modes that were sort of dying out. And here you've got stable play. You also have mass combat, which never really comes to much fruition in Dark Sun. There, it's meant to be the battle system world, and it never really is. Birthright tries to systematize domain play and mass combat as well. But yeah, so I didn't mind the character tree system, other than that that time restriction was ironically probably just less good than keeping a traditional track of where characters were. And if it's a character that hadn't been used, they could bamf in. That seems like an easier solution there. So yeah, I gave the party I think it's 3 hooks. You can go back and check and remember better than I did. 3 hooks about where they were, where they could go next. And they're all in the southeast of Athas, by the Salt Sea near Fort Sisera, which I just located out of the way. I don't think there's an official map location. And yeah, this is our XP record, which I just used docs for. And I haven't transferred my notes across to finish session 25, but that's why I was thinking about doing this. There's also some downtime to sort to do with some characters training, like many of the Nasir, possibly Nasir, I don't know. Certainly, a couple of these characters are likely to train. So Kent and Asher are as well. So yeah, these characters have trained and are waiting. Stiv, who is an active character, a living character, is not listed, but he'll be at Fort Sisera. Stiv, the half-giant who survived the Boulette, one of the 2 survivors of that debacle. So yeah, we start off and they're just wandering around. They decide they're going to go to a ruined city, and they fight some ambulatory cacti and get some XP. and as you see, I'm using class-based bonus XP, which I might have commented on this before, but essentially you can tell that class-based bonus XP is not in second edition terms where you hear, oh, a lot of this is house rules people are already using. I believe that sometimes the house rules are bad house rules; they are misunderstandings. You see that in second edition, but also sometimes you can see it's an attempt to deal with areas of either confusion or basically unpopular things in first edition, like direct attempts to deal with that, and so vastly simplifying weapon versus AC. Terrible rules in second edition, but like it's an attempt to simplify a complex system in first. And similarly, here, I think with bonus XP by class, it's an attempt to deal with rating PC performance for training and perhaps for and the rules perhaps around percentage of XP kept as well. It's an attempt to just systematize that. Now, actually, the story XP, this is where story XP comes in officially. Unofficially, story XP goes back. You'll see stuff like freeing merchants in T1 to 4, not T1, but in T1 to 4. Freeing merchants gets you XP, that kind of thing. But yeah, here I use it because I actually think as long as you build it into your XP assumptions on design, it does give a material encouragement for players to play their role, not play their character, but play their role, and including ethos, for instance, for for clerics. So Stiv was a half jump fighter. Gudea was a was trader druid or something. I don't know. Varys, triple class elf, who alas could only play the first session this time. Sidira was a she was a preserver trader. Gudea was a druid, and Maeve was a Templar of Nibene, who turned out to be quite evil. They go to Arc Code. Now, Arc Code, this was something, I think this was on the very end of the stream, or if not, of episode 25. If not, it was just off stream. But Beach guessed. Arc Code was based on Waterdeep. It's not canonically Waterdeep, it's not Waterdeep in the future, but I used the vastly overstuffed and frustrating Volo's Guide to Waterdeep by Ed Greenwood. The Volo's Guide ranges this fascinating set of digest-size second edition. They're really coffee table books. They're not literally, because they're not big and heavy and lovely, but this kind of like gimmicky, oh, this is an in-character guide, and it has some game notes. It is a sign of what's happened to Greenwood and the Forgotten Realms by the mid-90s. The upside, though, is that often the only is that it doesn't make them worse than the equivalent setting books being made by TSR. It makes them often denser and less easy to extract the good stuff from, which is a Greenwood issue with his lore writing. But say the Volo's Guide to Cormyr versus the Cormyr sourcebook, Volo's Guide to Cormyr is probably as useful, if not more. And so I used this. I was like, I might as well use this for something. I used it, and I used City System as well for more detailed maps, including building maps. But yeah, we use Waterdeep. Arkhold is a city nearby, ruined city, covered in sand, where a different section is revealed each week or whatever it was. And there was a citadel as well, so Castle Waterdeep, I guess, which apparently had something strange humanoids or something else in. The PCs didn't investigate that. They did a run in and basically came back out. You can see they go to the Jade Dancer, and they spend a couple of sessions there, up to session 4. Where they get this was their best treasure was £570 of rusted chain, because metal is rare, so they got a lot of XP for that. From session 2, Benvo, the ranger played by Jay, had joined in as well, and yeah, you can see that they fight some silt spawn in here. So there's a combat. There's a bit of they have to kind of. Sidira gets Sepia snake sigilled and has to be left behind, and ends up traveling on her own, which is slightly mental, and surviving. Yeah, you can watch that if you like. Escape from Arkhold here has a bit of it where she has to escape from, again, I think, a kind of evil cactus. But yeah. Maybe that's in Hard Won Wisdom. No, I think it's there. Yeah, Boulette, though, is the next important thing. They do get this stuff back, but they're going back out to go back to Arkhold to get Sidira, who's been Sepia snake sigilled, and to get more stuff. When they get random encounter into Boulette debacle here. Maeve, who does die, gets a bit of XP. Um, but yeah, what you get it's Kent also survives by going shadow form. This was actually a really interesting game experience because they nearly killed the Boulette. The Boulette didn't roll incredibly high on its HD, but the players, you can watch it. You see them panic. They don't know whether they want to form battle line and fight or whether they want to flee. A big thing is that Stiv, the half giant, goes down wounded early on, like knocked out and bleeding out. And if Stiv stays up another round and gets off a couple of attacks, maybe things are different. But because of that, there's just no one calls it, no one plans it. Jay, playing Benvo, does heroically attempt. He's like, hey, if we're going to die, let's die. And he attempts to finish off the Boulette and does very well, manages to keep out of its way, fights around, but just cannot hit for Toffee. I think the Boulette might have had 6 hit points or something. Benvo could have killed it. It would have been well deserved on Jay's part. He similarly, at the end of the Spelljammer first adventure we played on stream, Fussful chooses to stay and fight to save his friends and therefore wins the day and glory. Benvo could have had the same. Alas, it wasn't to be. But this creates this thing where the players talk and work out, and they continue to learn here with Hard-Won Wisdom, where they kill off a Black Mysterial. How to, because I think Koranu dies here, as does Sadira. So they actually lose a couple of characters, but they manage to, nonetheless, due to Ash's effective poison use, they managed to kill off the Black Mysterial. One of the Black Mysterials, who are like intelligent giant scorpions, fairly unpleasant. This is the second adventure they go on, so they're going to go back to Arkhold. That goes wrong. They then choose to say, let's just get this stuff to Barlick, the nearest city, sell it, particularly the valuable metal, and get our finances on a better, footing. And then they go to they stop at a box canyon on the way, which is actually quite fertile. And this was this thing. I think I was very happy. Of the 4 adventures, I think 3 of them really felt like for me, they represented something about my sense of Dark Sun, and I think the players agreed well. Because it's interesting, actually, the players, when we were reminiscing on favourite things that happened, this happened, I think, on stream at the end of session 25, people were saying the Sepia Snake Sigil, the Boulette, this, that, the other, these terrible things happening. The cactuses that ambush them, these very memorable things of this very vicious, brutal world, like D&D Dark Souls sort of thing. The idea that you have to iterate, you're leveling up characters at the same time because it's so bloody, your characters don't survive. You're having to learn quickly. And I think that's the thing with the box canyon involves that learning on the job. They've started to talk about what to do, and then they start to put that stuff into practice. A problem is that this is, I think, like apart from Garrus, this is like thieves and preservers. Zedric as well, technically, I guess, who may have been part of that. Yeah, he was part of that combat. It's a very light party, and Garrus, Jay's character, basically kites this scorpion after it's killed Sadira. They just make a mistake. It's interesting. You see them make a couple of mistakes in a row, even as they're learning, because iteration still involves that. They essentially don't scout out the tunnel ahead of them sufficiently when they're going in to find out what's up there, and end up, and they think okay, maybe we can deal with these scorpions, and they can't, but they managed to kill one, and Garrus successfully kites whilst everyone else fires, and Asher eventually poisons it. And it is a thing, they're like, oh, will poison even work? Nope, no immunity. Masterials are a Dark Sun specific creature, and this brings up, whereas Boulettes aren't, that was just a random encounter. The Masterial was pre-written, as I guess for the Silt Spawn in the Jade Dancer. The first adventure doesn't involve very much combat. It includes random encounter, and then it with the cactuses and some other weird stuff happening, and then they meet a ghost cat, and then they kill the Silt Spawn. Then on the way back out to Arkhold, and the Sepia Snake Sigil, which of course is not combat, just a spell trap. But they then go back out, and then the Boulette happens. In that sense, the box canyon feels like a very different kind of adventure in terms of there's a lot more things they do there, and there's a lot more combat. And one they actually end up going there. This is why is that they are told, okay, by some Aarakocra who have helped them, we've got pressure on our hunting grounds from these like weird flying creatures. Could you come and help us? They go to the Box Canyon. One thing was I modded it actually on I think what is the Zane Grey novel? Probably his most famous one, Shadow Riders, whatever it is. Um, it's set in like amongst a Mormon community and stuff. And there's a whole set of scenes in a box canyon where one of our heroes recovers with the outlaw woman he's captured slash rescued. And I was reading that and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I thought, I don't think there's breaches Dark Sun. The fact there's lots of water, for instance, you might go, oh, it's Dark Sun. Surely there can't be water. But I thought, no, this is a fertile place, but that means that stuff comes there and therefore danger comes there. It's a place that's been competed over by two humanoid tribes. It turns out to be Aarakocra and Tari, who are like intelligent rat men. They're like they're Nezumi basically from Legends of the Five Rings. They're intelligent, reasonably like neutralish rat men. So it's heavily competed for, and there's mysteries here in the same way they've gone to Arkhold and they found this ruined city of the old world with a talking golemy statue thing, which is how Beach recognised it as Waterhold the Jade Dancer. Or you've got, like or the metal and stuff, valuable old world loot. Now they're in a place where it's very much it's something that clashes with Dark Sun. It's not a ruin, but precisely because it's fertile, much like with the verdant, the verdant crescent and stuff, or whatever it's called, like the fertile lands of the Tyr region, is competed for, and so they're meeting all but there's mysteries there as well because people have stored stuff there before. So yeah, they fight this Mysterial, and then we have. I really enjoyed this. As I say, this captured for me it's a desert theme, not quite as deadly as environmental as other parts of Dark Sun, but the competition is there. They end up fighting a Salt Golem here, which is Garrus. Jay gets his glory both by killing the Salt Golem, but also by being the one tanking whilst their friend Ringo, the Aarakocra, is like dropping nets on it, and other people are casting spells to annoy it and stuff. So yeah, that's that feels like as they get through here, they explore, they find stuff, they defeat this Salt Golem. There are some mysteries in all this. They leave. They don't look in. Someone, one of the regulars, commented on session 25. They never look at the plug underneath the pool. This kind of I forget if it's metal or stone plug. I think it is in the bottom of the pool. They never find out what's there, but because they don't want to push the luck too far. This is still. They make peace between the Tari and the Aarakocra. That's cool, by the way, because that's them saying, look, this is Dark Sun, everything's terrible, but why not make allies? Why not kind of push back against that? And they're not being a super moral group. Some are good, many are neutral, some are even evil. At this point, we've got the core group, which settles down, actually, and these are all surviving characters. Marcia, the thief, played by Beej, who eventually levels. Gargi, is Gargi a druid? Is Gargi a priest or a druid? I think a druid, played by Alex. Asher, the bard, played by Andrew. Bentusi, the cleric, played by Simon. And Kent, the dwarf gladiator, who survived the Boulette fight, played by Tom. Zedric is, there's Garrus, who is Jay's character at this point, and then Zedric, who's an NPC who joins who's from House Sisra, and so he helps as like a lower level fighter. He's actually nearly at second level, and it's, in a way, though he might have died, it's a shame he didn't go on the Antloid quest because he could have got the XP to level. I guess he'll probably get it on the way back. But now they want to go and finish off these Masterials, mostly because they want to get their stuff. What the problem, it turns out, is that they're like, we don't have the Wand of Paralysation that Sidira got, which was very valuable loot from Arkhold. We don't have a couple of other things, and the one particularly is so valuable. So they ally with the Tari, and Ringo might be amongst those allies that are mentioned here, and they go back, and as you see, they take them both out. I think some Tari die, but none of them do. Um, Invisibility to animals. This was an interesting thing, by the way, as a like what things do players do that are that don't work. What is part of the iteration is that Gargi getting up Dust Devils, Bentusi getting a Flame Blade. They both drop CLWs and Bless. This is very good cleric play. They don't have any fighters with them in terms of in player because Jay's not there for that session. Garrus isn't there. Later on, actually, with the Antloids, we keep players we keep characters whose players aren't there because of the way that the map is set up and the OOB is set up. But here, in general, I think bamfing players out. There's an interesting question, I guess, about realism, and I think in IRL games, and in fact, and in some other online games, I'll say, oh yeah, the player's not here, but the character is. In some, I don't, and I let them bamf out. There's not necessarily a complete strict rule, but I think there's a certain degree of unless players have really committed to something and you need all that strength and they're like, look, we've only done it because Bob and Jim said we should do it. They're not here. We don't want to be here either if their characters aren't here. There is a dynamic there, but otherwise just saying, yeah, the player can't be around for a couple of sessions. His character can be assumed to be back at the caravan. In this case, actually, their caravan was being protected by the Aarakocra as well, their Aarakocra allies, so it was particularly safe. There's no issue of random encounters eating it. But of course, that's the question too, is if you're like, oh, they're back at the camp, and you're running encounters for the camp, which I certainly do in some cases. Yeah, there's a question there that I think is also partly to do with the fact that the format of this is not an open table, but a somewhat like, look, we understand people are going to be busy. Just try to get there. Try to be around semi-regularly if you're committing to it. And in that case, part of the give and take is that the players understand they're not going to get their characters just wiped because they can't make a session. But yeah, so they don't have Garrus, and they don't have Asher actually either in this case. But yeah, invisibility to animals anyway. This is a failure because Mysterials are too intelligent for it. But it's a good failure. I mean, Bentusi takes the points, the XP for it correctly because he cast a spell and it worked. It went off, but it's rather than it being wasted or whatever, lost or whatever. But it just doesn't work on the Mysterials because the Mysterials are too intelligent. And there's an interesting thing there of like, is that a bad play? And in this case, do you punish them by not getting the XP? It's a good play in the sense they're not sure. The Mysterials are psionic. Are they in? I have got the monstrous compendia here because I thought a couple of these things might be worth talking about. The Scorpions. Barbed and Gold. Maybe they're under Masterial. Masterial, yeah. Desert and Black. This one, the second one, by the way, actually it's got the player option stuff relating to mental AC and changing some of the psionic systems, which do not improve players' options, combats and powers and skills and powers, does not improve that for psionics. Psionics is interesting. Maybe the digression now. I have psionics in 3 of my campaigns for second edition in terms of actively. Not every game I run has psionicists in it, but I have psionicist characters in Open Table Realms and Greyhawk and in Dark Sun. And I like them well enough. I think I've talked with this a little bit with Prince on our chat stream, but he doesn't like the proficiency checks. I don't mind them. I like them well enough. I think there's a question about like, but isn't that just one argument against proficiency checks for psionics, by the by, is just like, you don't have that for spells. But that's kind of the point, is psionics are so flexible when you have a character built around them rather than a randomized thing, which can be really weak or really powerful. I think you see the early attempts to fix the half-baked psionics rules in Dragon Magazine, is it 78? And something like that. I've got, I think it's not, is it the one with Citadel by the Sea? I've got it anyway. And it gives a few different approaches to solving stuff to do with psionics. And one idea is the psionicist class, and one idea is giving different ways of accessing the powers and stuff. I think the psionicist class works and is good for me. I like it, and I like how it is different to magic. The effects are usually smaller but more reliable. However, the proficiency check creates a doubt there. I think the one thing is that there are a number of enough subsystems, and this is the same with first edition. This is a first edition appendix problem, not problem, just fact. Is that they there are different subsystems within Psionics to do with Sonic monsters versus Psionicists, Sonic monsters versus non-Psionicists, where that's relevant, which it isn't usually. The way that second edition then PHBR5 Complete Psionics tries to deal with that and change that. The way in which combat works different. Psionic combat works differently to Psionic powers, even where they might overlap. Second does attempt to fix some of this in some ways to do with explicitly kind of how it deals explicitly with defense modes working in other situations. Mileage will vary on what's better. But one thing I definitely note in terms of my mental load is that I'm still learning how to run Sonic monsters, how to introduce them, and I have into these games. The Mysterio was one. The Dunamis Antloids were one, which I'll touch on when we get there. And I've used is it orange mold, whatever it is, whatever the kind of does yellow mold, is that Sonic in second edition? I'd have to check. But yeah, have to I use that in Open Table Realms. So having these extra challenges for the Sonic's player, Grey users actually as well, but then still having to learn as I go and still not being perfect at it. And one thing is just even when you technically know the sciences, or the sciences and devotions they have, and the attack modes they have. The Mysterio, I think, did do direct attacks, for instance. I need to check that. But yeah, the idea that you've got these abilities and it can help. And I did use their clairvoyance, for instance. They knew what the players were doing due to clairvoyance. But did I attack the sonically gifted characters sufficiently with them? I don't know. But yeah, that was a very satisfying set of encounters. And then they travel to Barlick, and they're traveling through. And I think the start of City Slicking is the same, but essentially, Session 12 is a travel one, and people are just chipping away at stuff. City Slicking, we finally get to Barlick, and we have they're just starting to cash stuff in. They sell the titanium because the titanium, though is not very much metal, is very valuable. Obviously, it's 1,000. CPXP, that's because it's gold, and as in its gold value. Ceramics equals gold. Silver equals essentially platinum, and gold equals mega platinum, 10 platinum equivalent. But they sell some normal stuff. They get some magic and they keep it. The Ring of Coolness and the Ring of Protection. They have what they know to be a magical periapt, and I think a magical dreamcatcher as well, but they haven't worked out what's going on with those yet. Double gold XP for thieves it's not at all broken. It's actually that's the kind of thing I've definitely seen on like discussions about second edition AD&D from people who, the issue where if you already have a problem or don't like those systems of XP, to with gold for XP, or basic first edition assumptions, you prefer story XP, you secretly really just want to milestone characters. I think seeing that as double gold XP, that's terrible. Well, you're like, no, but they level cap. If they go too far, that's just happened in my open table game. The characters cannot completely spam their way through. But it is essentially the same. It's rewarding them where they can't get magical XP, usually. I guess you could feel sorry for fighters maybe in all this, because fighters, the default bonus XP is 10 XP per HD defeated per level. So you defeat an orc at first level, you get 10 XP. At third level, you get 30 XP. And it's flat. You'd think it might go the other way. You get loads of bonus XP at first level, but less later. But it's meant to scale. You defeat creatures, and of course it's still very little because it's only 1 HD, so it's only 30 XP. At third level, that's not very exciting for a fighter who needs 4,000 extra to go up. It's less than 1%. But thieves get half that, and they get the bonus gold XP. And I think the fight, in that sense, you may pity a little bit for not being able to You like spam anything else to get bonus XP. But I think my experience in practice again is that that doesn't make a big difference. You know, the bonus XP is just part of it's a rounding mechanism essentially. It's ensuring that everyone can kind of get some bonus stuff for doing stuff that their class is good at. And yeah, in practice, it's not a big problem. And as I say, for thieves and for clerics, I guess technically as well, you've got that level cap, that XP cap. They're then just exploring for a bit, and then they pick up this here and here. They pick up a couple of quests essentially. They decide to pursue a rumor they take, which I take off my Barlock rumor table. They generate rumors about there being a reward of 1,000 silver, I think. So 10,000 ceramic to go into the silver mines and to deal with the animal infestation in the lower levels. They also hear via this from Asher meeting someone who's plainly a Veiled Alliance contact that there is, in the Undercity, there's going to be an exchange or trade of magical items, and they're like, man, we should get in on that because that's valuable. And the Quintus, who has come in at this point with Marcia training, Quintus Nasir is replacing Gargi here, and yeah, not in terms of Garrus gets trained and swaps out for Adriad at that point. But you've got characters starting to train, so new characters come in. Quintus is a Templar or a Praetor of the Sorcerer King of Barlek, Andropolis. And one thing I like about Barlek, I found convenient in terms of location, is that it is presented as it's not dysfunctional like Ram, it's not incredibly bloody like Draj, it's not super controlled and centralized like Nibene, most obviously. But maybe to some degree Uruk as well. You know, a lot of the cities of the Tyr region, especially once you kind of count, it depends where you start your game. But if you're like Kalak is there, but he's built, and he's not necessarily the most unreasonable of them all, but he's now building a pyramid and he needs loads of slaves. You're like, so Tyr is miserable for that reason. Obviously, once freedom is over, and if you advance the meta plot either in game or out of game, you might have a free city. But it is a thing that, like, where do you start people? And one reason you get recommendations about, you could start out in the desert or you could start at a town, I think is to avoid the way in which just a lot of the cities are, because it's a bit grimdark, we now say, are pretty miserable and tough to be in. And they probably shouldn't be quite so much. There is a way, I think, to dial that down. But Barlek, as this sort of trading city with a veneer of democracy in its Templar election, things like that, I think it works a bit better in that way. It's an easier, gentler place. It's big into trading. It's a bit more open, and I think that's something. The fact that Quintus then is a Templar in his home city, but where Maeve is a spy for Nibene, and I guess if they'd gone back to Nibene, that would have been a weird dynamic. Quintus here, lawful neutral as well, not evil, albeit his master is evil, but he can kind of run both sides of it. He can be like, yeah, I need to enforce the law, but also we can probably just keep this stuff because no one cares, or whatever. There can be a bit of, he can act with a little bit more independence, perhaps. So now we have a couple of episodes in the Antloids, and then we have 5 sessions, something like that. Yeah, 2 sessions with versus the Antloids, then 5 in the Undercity, and then they go back to Antloids. Basically, they realise they haven't taken enough support, I think is their conclusion here, with the Antloids. They do bring some hirelings, but the hirelings are thinned out a little bit, and their shield bearer does survive and goes with them to the Undercity, but then dies in their second attack on the Antloids. Poor guy. In fact, no, I think he died. Why does he die? I think he dies in the Undercity, possibly. I'll have to check that. But yeah, again, the Undercity, this was in some ways, it felt not unsuccessful. I think it was a fun adventure. We'll go to the Antloids when I return to that at the end for the last run. But the Undercity, I designed a couple of sections of things which could connect, therefore, under Barlek. Just outside of the city, you've got the silver mine. There's mines, there's caverns underneath that. And then there's the Undercity by the Longshore. And I could add other bits as well. I had ideas for that. And that's fun. And that is definitely a sword and sorcery thing, the Undercity. And that definitely fits the Dark Sun vibe. So that feels good. And the actual gameplay, really enjoyed. And some of the elements in terms of pushing this, the mysteries of Athas. What's this weird thing, this forgotten, fallen world, which presses into a bit of the idea of a dead or dying Mars, which is a sword and sorcery or a sword and planet trope. Um, and yet, it's interesting. That's not something that's universal in sword and sorcery. Conan and Fafnir and the Grey Mouser do not heavily trade. There might be ruins, but the idea there are wonders of lost ages is marginally there. It's more there in Conan. But that is this thing in sword and sorcery and in some of the other Appendix N type things. Um, and I guess probably Harold Lamb as well, and a few other places. Whether it's fantasy or not, this lost civilizations. The H. Rider Haggard, and I think there's some nice touches there. Like they find a gate, they start to think maybe you have to like get halfling blood to activate it. They don't do that at that time. They don't have a halfling, I think, initially. They're like, okay, let's go and find these criminals. They find some, they find some mysteries. They find a weird, mouldy bedroom which seems inhabited. Like it seems like it's not completely uninhabited, but no one's there at the time. They steal some stuff from it. They find some weird stuff down there. But I think my sense is, though, as I say, the gameplay was fun. Even though the players, I think, once they gotten over the initial danger points, then like they had a bit of nip and tuck. It was a bit tough for a bit, but once they're actually into the kind of fighting big bad guy characters, at one point fighting three significantly leveled NPCs plus some hirelings, they actually rolled over them, and that was, I think, a combination of things. But I think it was good gameplay and luck. But I think it's positional. Once they'd gotten into the better position, and once they had thinned out the enemy, they were able to deal with it, and at that point, luck can then sweep things pretty quickly. But I think what was lacking, perhaps, was it maybe just because it didn't feel quite as insanely challenging. Maybe that's my inability as a DM to quite completely analyze or parse what's gone on. Maybe that's all I mean. But I think it just didn't feel quite as baroque. Basically, that's the thing. The Box Canyon is baroque in one sense. It's kind of strong environmental. There's this kind of dynamic of there's mystery and conflict. There's very dangerous creatures, salt golems, Masterials, Arkhold, ruined city covered by shifting sands. And I think in that sense, the Undercity, though it had some nice thematic things, was probably weaker on that, and could have, in that sense, have been more mistaken for other settings. They returned to the Antloids, and as I say, so you've got your into the silver mine stuff here. The Dunamis, they slay a Dunamis early on, and some soldiers the next time, which soldiers are, and some workers. The soldiers, there's a few things to say about how I ran these guys. Actually, is there anything left about the Undercity to say? Yeah, there's some fun stuff they do, like using the evil source clerics command undead to be at least friendly, if not actively under control, to create a trap for the enemy, which does help a lot. Yeah, that's actually a point I have not. I was just thinking this. I have not actually credited Asher with some poison XP, so they should have got. But they get some cool loot out of that anyway, including a metal sword. This is some of the magical metal longsword, some of the magical treasure they get. So hey, that's fun. They finally get a cool metal longsword, but obviously that's the thing. It's listed as a longsword. I think I was saying short sword in the last session. My mistake. Yeah, they kill off a Defiler. They kill off a strong enemy Templar who is, I think, dies via poison particularly. And win through. But yes, in terms of the Antloids are a Dark Sun creature like the Masterial, and like the Tarry. The Aarakocra are, I think, do get their own entry. Possibly, is it in this one? I'm not sure. they do. There is. I feel like there is a Dark Sun Aarakocra or Athasian Aarakocra version. Yeah, Aarakocra Athasian. And I used that as the basis for their, their tribe, and obviously wrote all that out. There's they had their own dynamics generated from the Monster Manual entry, as did the Tari. There's some other, the Hurum, the little household insect creature. That was that's a Dark Sun speciality. That was a very minor encounter, I grant. The Salt Golem might be, but yeah, the Desert Antloid. There are 4 types. The Dunamis, spelt Dynamis. It's like dynamic, but Dunamis is Greek for power. Soldier, Queen, and Worker. And the hit dice over these is the Soldiers are 6+1, the Workers are 3, the Dunamis is 4+2, the Queen is 8+1. And they're sandy wastes, which could fit an area near a city. And I was like, also they are warren creatures. So I thought, look, I want an underground creature, and this will suit me. And it's roughly in the right HD range. Except, I should say, given they went down as fourth level party, the Soldiers, as the most common super dangerous opponent, and I'll comment on that, are maybe a bit tough for them. It was in that sense they were slightly under-leveled for the content, and this is part of the problem they faced with their casualties. They were unable to, for instance, tank through, apart from their Hireling Sarnasis, they were unable to tank through the archers, the archer antnoids poison gland, which did 30 damage on a failed save. I enjoyed the antnoids as a enemy force, and the design. I probably want to rewrite the dungeon a bit, so that the warrens a bit, just to because it had originally gone from being like, quite a rough. There are a couple of general areas to needing. I need a better map for the players to actually go around. And I had it, I had an encounter mechanic and stuff, but I didn't have gold values for everything else. Like, well, what's an egg valued at? So there's some stuff that has come out of in terms of design through play and through the players taking an interest, and also the kinds of information you realise they need. Even if it's a simple environment, there's 10 rooms or 12 rooms. The Undercity was actually larger, but they didn't empty or exhaust that area of the Undercity. But the Antnoid Caves, they saw nearly everything on the map. They had 2 entrances, basically, hadn't gone down. One was off the side near the entrance itself, the top entrance. The other was a passage out of the Nest Warren, the Queen's kind of main central chamber. And they didn't go those places because they didn't need to. But yeah, it's a small environment, but you still need, even off those 10 rooms, and enough background data. So there's an adventure design piece of learning and advice there. Fairly obvious, I guess, for many of us. But it was a relearning, at least. But yeah, in terms of, I think the Workers I was fine with, and the Queen I was fine with. She tried to use her... The one time she had someone in range, which was this new Mool Gladiator at +9 damage, or whatever mental thing that Simon brought in. The Queen did try to use her madness pheromones, but he saved and killed her in like two big hits. She didn't roll super high. I mean, at 8+1, I think it was, the point is that someone doing +9 damage, you can have like 28, or I think she had 30 HP or something, and you still get wiped from someone hitting big with a big weapon. And the Soldiers and Dunamis, I definitely was experiencing again, and it's not. I definitely think some of this is relative inexperience. It sounds funny because I'm like, well, I've run, hundreds of hours of this stuff. Of D&D using, AD&D monsters. I've run thousands, like, I mean, probably 1,000 hours or more. But nonetheless, I think there is a thing where you can run stuff that's like 1st to 5th level content, and you only get a few complex things there. Whereas as you start to hit the core mid levels into high levels, and you start to use more than one of a monster, or more than a couple of a particular kind of thing. And this is particularly true, actually, more true with humanoids. This has come up with, or demi-humans come up with my high-level playtest I've been running. But you just realise, these creatures have movesets, we'll call them, which require you kind of need to learn them a bit. You need to know them beforehand. And in some cases, I've read an entry, I've put something in, I've been, oh, that's a cool thing. I might have made a note about it. But when I'm running it, I'm then like, oh, okay, I need to actually really know this thing. And I think the Antloids, one thing I don't think I fully clocked when I put down was that there are two types of soldiers. Literally, I think I hadn't, and then I redesigned once I realised that. I was like, okay, we'll do it like this. One soldier has a stinger, one has an acid spray, and usually with the ones with the stinger, I in the first couple of combats I was more likely to use it, but once they're in the central chamber, they didn't so much. But they did have this archer. They did have, I think, I had two archers overall, but I and they hated the archer doing this kind of like save or take 30 damage stuff. But I think it felt righteously challenging. They enjoyed that side of it. But again, there was a needing to learn, even there, over just a fairly simple binary. And also learning, there's a design thing, is like, how much is too much? Is it that the way I've designed this is they're not just a bit underleveled, but they're so underleveled that because the dungeon is a liminal state where the naturalistic assumptions of the world where players avoid stuff, travel through stuff, etc. The dungeon, if it's there on their map and they have information they could go and do it, that is a suggestion from the DM that they can do it. They might be underleveled or overleveled. They might need to scout. They might need to be like, oh, maybe we'll come back later. But of course, if you're in a situation where you're like, no, this is like a bit like saying to a first level party, oh, there's some strange large humanoids nearby in a steading that looks like a big Norse longhouse, but they've been causing trouble recently. Could you go and deal with them? And it's G1, and this ridiculous. Obviously, they might turn around, but imagine you've got players who just don't. The giant is recognisable, but the giant tank could be very takeable. So maybe there's also a design question about how far, and a play question about how far do I push the brutality of the Antloids when and I think in the end I found I was basically happy. I was able to run them as they were without very much tactical adjustment to not to be too over leveled on the PCs. The players were playing well, and they didn't mind the fact that it was challenging. It wasn't something where I had misinformed them and screwed up the design and TPK'd them for that reason. The Boulette is different. The Boulette they had warning for. They both felt the rumbling, and the Ghost Cat warned them. They could have come up with a plan, and they nearly won. The Boulette is fine. If you have a dungeon encounter, particularly, I think this is, which is just auto kill functionally, that's not fun. And the player doesn't learn from it and doesn't know how, just learns the world is not fun and not interesting to interact with. The Dunamis, there's a slightly distinct problem, which was, I've already mentioned, to do with the psionics, which was just that I was having to kind of check stuff from, like, this guy has, under psychometabolism, 4, 6, 8 powers, and under telepathy has 3. The telepathy didn't really matter. Telepathic projection was the only one that was relevant there, really. Contact and mind link. But it was the psychometabolism, death field, shadow form, cause decay, double pain, flesh armor. Those are useful combat powers, but you need to know them. And I know the spells better than I know the psionics, and it's not like I know every single PHB spell off the top of my head. Still, as it were, learning. And I think, that was. I do like, by the way, there's some decent art in these MCs. There's the other one. So the Dunamis, I think I got some decent. Deathfield stuff off to wipe out hirelings, and double pain did a bit of annoyance at the end. But I would probably, if running the same adventure again, I probably want to do that better. I probably want to show a bit more canny and nous about what what my powers were. There was a high body count on frontline fighters and on the hirelings, as in a lot of hirelings died, and I'm not sure that might represent, because I was mostly statting them as 0 levels because they were soldiers. But as this is Dark Sun, should first level be the standard? Of course, even first level, first level hirelings in close quarters versus Antloid soldiers 6+1 aren't going to survive. Even the workers do whatever it is, like 1d6 plus 12 damage with the mandibles. I think that's an interesting bit of monster design, by the way, that I appreciate. The Dunamis and the worker aren't super tough, but the worker has this horrendous attack, and and the Dunamis has these psionics. The Queen is very easy to hit, but has powerful pheromones. It's a -4 save. And the soldier is very tough and has horrendous attacks, like both a decent attack, which is 2d6, I think, or something, maybe 3d6, and the stinger or spray. The stinger, as it's a save or die thing, as a design thing, I actually prefer that less. I don't mind save or die in general, but I prefer that less to the spray on the archer, because I think you're building into that. It's no longer a 6+2 creature. You're talking about it's got high AC, it's got a big natural attack, and its alternative attack is deadly. And there's no limitation, I think, listed. And that's something there that you're like, the archer, the fact that the archer is presumed to stay back and has this kind of save or take 2d6 or take 30, if you're 4th or 5th level, you might be able to survive that as a fighter. This is where 4th level is maybe slightly under level, but certainly 5th or 6th. But there was a very high body count on, like, Gola died, and Kent during the first go-in was injured. Mutami died, who I think was dual class. Unu was walking wounded here. Yeah, by the end, they really did, in Fight or Flight, I called that pretty intentionally, because you did have a thing that, though Simon turned up with this insane Maul Gladiator to somewhat help save the day, they might have won anyway, to be fair. But there was a thing where they didn't have many of their hireling fighters left. They kind of had Quintus, more or less, and Jaitamar, who was kind of second rank fighters up there. They had a bunch of bowmen, which helped. They still had a bit of oil. There was a thing there where we screwed up the kind of accounting for that, which, whether it's my fault or the player's fault, in the end, we kind of blagged our way through to be like, you probably have some more. That's the thing, by the way, that obviously, it didn't actually frustrate me, but it's a frustration because when you're trying to provide the challenge and you're giving your players good options to solve it, and I think getting lots of oil was good, you want that then to be recorded properly and executed properly, and the fact that we just lost that information was annoying. Could have gone back and watched through an episode, and I don't even know where it was in the episode. I don't know which episode it was they bought it. We could do that, but what we did, I think, was the practical, we're at the table, let's make a decent decision kind of thing. But they had good plans, they had some options, but they knew that they had badly wounded a lot of the enemy. They knew that the main guards were really injured. I guess they didn't calculate whether or not the workers would join in, but by then I concluded the workers have it, with the egg chamber having been violated, with an attack on the central chamber, there's going to be a partial evacuation. And they didn't really massively interfere with that. They tried to a bit, but it did mean that a random encounter didn't turn into an extra fight. They just had that central chamber to deal with, and they cleared it out, and they lost some more hirelings, but they made their way through and won the day. It was a great deal of fun. I think it could have gone either way. I think once Canley turned up, the soldiers were still a risk, but they'd started, because the soldiers were so injured who were guarding the Queen, they were able to get through them. And the Dunamis came over and did some annoying double pain stuff, double damage kind of thing. But that, in the end, Jaitamar scraped through. You can watch that, is that he takes a couple of big hits, double pain, double stuff, and he's on, and I'm like, I think he's dead. I know he's on 2 HP at the end. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to go back to that in a few months' time. They'll travel back to Fort Sistra. They will work out what next to have more leveled characters, and I guess we'll start seeing them hit 5th and maybe even 6th because of exactly where they are on the XP, where they are for XP now. Everyone got to level, apart from Norman's character. Nuno won't have reached that, though I need to check. Yeah, I think it showed to me also that Dark Sun is classic gameable. It's not just that you can tell a story by having some nice pre-written modules or a storyline you have to do to save the world, but it's something where if you realise that here you have a sword and sorcery landscape of ruin and of potential profit and adventure, it's just a normal D&D setting in that way. And I'm trying to do the same with the Spelljammer material I'm designing for next month. Anyway, if you have watched any of the Dark Sun stuff, please tell me what you thought, and I hope this has been useful in terms of reflection for those of you who think about, who debrief on their own stuff afterwards, and what skills we need to pick up and develop. Tell me your own experiences in the comments. Till next time.